Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. One of the most common questions I get is something like this. Hey, I know some scales and I practice some chord tones and stuff, but I can't really put it together when I improvise. It just sounds like I'm playing those chord tones or just sounds like I'm playing scales. How do I make a coherent and lyrical solo? Well, good news. This is something that you can actually practice, and it's pretty simple. I'm going to show you a really clear and concise exercise, actually two in fact, that will really help you connect those chords together and create lyrical and melodic solos. Most people seem to make things either way too complex or way too vague. They say things like, oh, you have to feel it and you have to kind of just hear it. If you don't live it, it won't come out of your instrument. Well, that's great and all, but that doesn't really help you if you're just trying to get better and trying to create these solos. So like I said, in this video, I'm going to show you two really simple, very actionable exercises that you can practice today that will help you get better at improvising. Here's the really cool thing I have for you. In this video, I'm showing you two very simple exercises, but actually this is part of a larger masterclass that I have that is completely free. So if you want to watch the entire thing, once again, completely free, get all the downloads for it for free, go to the link at the top of the description down below, and I'm also going to put that link in the pinned comment. In the entire masterclass, I not only go through these two exercises, but my entire simple 6-step process to voice leading to create beautiful melodic solos. Along with teaching you those 6 simple exercises, I give you some sample lines as well, both diatonic and non-diatonic. In this video, when I go through the 2 simple exercises, I'm using some very common chord changes, but in the entire masterclass, I not only use those common chord changes, but some other very non-standard chord changes as well to show you how this simple process works over any song that you want to solo over. So make sure you have that PDF downloaded. You can either print it out or have it on a device, and let's jump into the exercises. All right, now let's dive into the voice leading worksheet that you hopefully have downloaded and probably printed out by now. As I go through this, I want you to follow along. If you want to grab your instrument and play along, that'd be great. If not, no worries. The other great thing about it being a video is you can pause it, rewind it, rewatch parts as much as you need to. So, as you probably know by now, this worksheet is all about voice leading. What is voice leading? Well, at its core, voice leading is just looking at notes and how they move from one note to the next note, and then in jazz terms, specifically from one chord to the next chord. So we're focusing on the notes that you play from chord to chord. Why is this so important, and why am I really harping on this? It's because so many people play vertically. Vertically to me is not the best way to play if you're trying to play melodic solos. Vertically to me means if you see a chord, you play whatever you want over that chord. Then you see the next chord, you disregard what you played in the previous chord, and you just play whatever you want over the next chord, and so on and so forth. This will work, but it is not strong voice leading, and it's not going to sound cohesive, and that's the whole point of this. I always like to say that improvisation happens at the bar line. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean at the bar line is when the chord switches if it's one chord per measure, and that's to me where improvisation really happens. During the measure, during a chord, as you'll see here, isn't nearly as important as that transition from chord to chord. So in this PDF and in this worksheet, what I'm going to be talking about is the first 8 measures of all the things you are. I'm going to be going through it in concert key, so if it sounds a little weird to you, just know that I'm doing it on the C sheet in concert key. So if you're looking at the B flat or the E flat sheet, obviously the notes are going to be a little different. Voice leading really happens at the bar line, like I said, but really it happens from beat 4 into beat 1. And that's really the main focus of this worksheet. How do we get from beat 4 of the current chord into beat 1 of the next chord in a smooth way to keep us moving horizontally through the changes? I'm going to show you how. I'm going to be using terms like neighbor tones or leading tones. Basically, to me, a neighbor tone is just a note that's right below or right above the landing tone. I might use a term like enclosure. Enclosure is just a term when you play a note below and above and then land on the landing note, or above and below, as you'll see. Landing tones are going to be the notes that you land on or that you hit right when the chord switches. As a general rule of thumb, good landing tones are chord tones, so 1, 3, 5, or 7 if they're 7th chords. And in this worksheet, I'm only going to be focusing on landing on the 3rd. I believe that the 3rd is the best landing tone of any chord, if it has a 3rd, obviously. But there are other good ones as well. I believe 5 is really good, and 7 can work really well. The only problem with landing on the 7th is that sometimes with dominant chords or minor chords, it's still kind of unresolved, so it wants to go forward, which is totally fine. But for this, I want to find the most stable I can, which is going to be the 3rd. So if you look at the worksheet on page 1, you're going to see the first 8 measures of All the Things You Are. The cool thing about this song is the melody is basically thirds every single measure as well, so that works perfectly for our landing tone of a 3rd. So the first example you're going to hear is me playing through those first 8 measures, only playing those landing tone thirds. So if you know the song, you probably hear that as the melody, and it just so happens that All the Things You Are, the melody is mostly 3rd, so it works really, really well. The cool thing is you can do this process of just playing the 3rd of every chord for any song, and you're going to hit some good notes. But like I said, jazz happens at the bar line, so how can we lead into those? The first voice leading line we're going to talk about is the neighbor tone, and we're going to start with the lower neighbor. The idea of this is you have your landing tones, you're going to hit the 3rd of each measure, but on beat 4 of the current measure, you're going to play a chord tone or a note that works in the key center of the current measure that is just below the next landing tone. So if you look at the worksheet at the one lower neighbor spot, you'll see that in the first measure when we have F minor 7, beat 4, I put the note C because that's the note that is one below our next landing tone of D flat. Now you notice that it's a half step, it's C up to D flat. Sometimes these are going to be half steps, sometimes they're going to be whole steps. It depends on the current chord and the next landing chord. So if you go through all 8 bars or the entire song, once again, this is just an example for you to do on any song you want, as many measures as you want. If you go through and you hit your landing note of a 3rd, you put the lower neighbor on beat 4 that leads up to the 3rd, it'll sound like this over the beginning of All the Things You Are. All right, now we're starting to hear some voice leading, and you're going to hear it work through the changes. What can we do next? Well, let's do an upper neighbor. So you're going to take the exact same process that you did for the lower neighbor, but instead of going below the landing note, you're going to do one note above and then go into the landing note. In this case is a 3rd, and here's what that sounds like. All right, so that gives a different sound, but hopefully you're still hearing that landing note ahead of time because that voice leading is starting to get ingrained in your ear and in your brain. And don't worry, as you go through this process, it's going to become more and more apparent where that voice leading is. All right, I hope these simple exercises have opened your eyes a bit and showed you that you can actually do this. You can improvise really well and you can create those melodic solos that you've always wanted, and it's not some super complex and vague thing. Be sure to watch the entire free masterclass that goes through the entire 6-step process on some standard and non-standard chord changes by using the link in the description down below. I've gotten so much great feedback about this masterclass and all the other things that I've been teaching here, and it really makes me so happy to see that what I am teaching is getting through to so many of you. I know that things can seem complicated, especially when talking about improvising. You could be, confused, things could be vague, you don't really get a grasp on it, but my goal is to make things simple and concise for you so you can practice them and get better in the shortest amount of time possible. If there are some other topics you'd like to see me discuss here, please let me know in the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.